This is the Bates Bobcast, our weekly podcast about the week that was in Bates athletics. My name is Aaron Morse, and this week we're recapping a remarkable year in Bates sports with Director of Athletics Stacey Bunting. Plus, the rowing teams turned in impressive performances at nationals, with the women taking second place at the NCAA Championships and the men finishing fifth at the IRA National Championship. And we catch up with Richard Johnson from the class of 1978, who recently retired after a long career as the curator of the Sports Museum in Boston. That's coming up on the Bates Bobcast. The Bates women's rowing team finished national runner-up at the NCAA Championships on Friday. With the event condensed to one day due to weather down in Georgia, both crews advanced to their respective grand finals with strong performances in Friday morning's heats. Then that afternoon, the second varsity 8 placed fifth, and the first varsity 8 took second, combining to score 45 points. That was good for second place overall, the program's best finish at NCAAs since 2022. The women's 2V has battled injuries all year, and Friday was no different. In fact, sophomore Olivia Hill, who traveled to nationals as one of 3 alternates, had to step into the boat for the grand final in the 5th seat, and she helped the Bobcats outrace Wellesley for a crucial 8 points, making Olivia Hill our female Bobcat of the week. Well, looking back at the NCAA Championships, women's rowing second varsity 8, Olivia Hill, our female Bobcat of the week, joining us. Before we talk about NCAAs, Olivia, a little bit about your background. You're a sophomore out of Boston. Tell me a little bit about growing up. Obviously, rowing very big in Boston. You have the Charles River right there. But tell me a little bit about how you first got into rowing. What made you want to continue with that sport once you went to college and everything?
I started rowing in middle school in 7th grade, so I was 13. And I rowed for Row Boston, which is a team that's nonprofit based, that's free for all Boston public school students. So that was kind of the selling point that got me and my family kind of into the sport, because it's pretty rare to have a rowing program that is free of cost. So that was huge. And it was a program that was as competitive or non-competitive as you wanted it to be. It just was designed to sort of get public school students into the sport of rowing.
What made you like it so much?
I actually did not like rowing at first. I was really young. I was 13, and it was really scary. I started in the winter, which is not an easy start. I was right on the erg right away, and that was tough. I didn't really have like a super athletic background, so it was definitely like a struggle at first. And then starting in the winter and then learning how to row in the spring, just like being plopped into a boat, was very, very scary for me. But I really started to grow to like it. I think I'm someone who really likes to be competitive. I made a lot of close friends and teammates. I had like a really strong coaching staff that really developed my love for it.
And you mentioned not much of an athletic background, so you didn't play very many other sports, or no?
No, I didn't play any sports. I danced before I rowed. Yeah. Gotcha.
What was the first time you went in the water? What was that like?
Oh my gosh, I don't know if I remember that. I actually think the first time I went on the water, I was put in the coxswain seat because they needed an extra coxswain. So that was pretty crazy. I really had no idea what I was doing, and no one really told me what I was doing, and I definitely made some steering errors. But yeah, it was crazy. I had never had an experience like that before, and it was wild that we were just sitting out there in a boat on the water.
I know sometimes when you're in high school, you get to go on the head of Charles and stuff like that. Did you get to do that in high school at all?
Yeah, I was really lucky. I got to do that pretty much all 4 years of high school, because when you're a team on the Charles River, you get an automatic bid. So you don't have to like fight super hard to get a bid. And my team was really small, so we would send a cox squad to head of the Charles every year, and almost every year I got to race in it, and it was like the coolest experience ever. We looked forward to it every year. It was just like so awesome to like be on our home course that we knew so well, and the crowds were always so amazing. Yeah, it was really cool.
So when you came time to look for colleges, what made Bates the place for you?
I was looking for a small school. I really have a strong background with Maine, and I was actually, this is funny, I was at a semester away program in high school in Wiscasset, Maine. That's just like sort of like a broad type thing, not abroad. And one of my favorite teachers there was Bates class of 2020, and she actually put me in contact with Hannah Fitz because I knew that I wanted to row in high school. In college, I was interested in looking at Bates, interested in D3 NESCAC schools. And she put me in contact with Hannah Fitz, and I had this awesome phone call with her my junior year of high school, and she really sold me on Bates and Bates Rung, and now she is the coach here, so that's really cool. We had a really good conversation, and I knew that the team and the coaching environment was something that I was really drawn to, and I went on an official and really felt comfortable with everyone.
Great. So last year you come into Bates. You're in the 4th varsity 8 at the National Invitational Rowing Championships. Got a bronze medal there. And this year, you're in the 3V there. Got a bronze medal again at NIRCs. But you weren't maybe necessarily expecting to row at NCAAs, but you were thrown in there in the 2V due to an injury. I mean, take us through kind of your mentality when you were going to nationals this year as an alternate.
Yeah, I was really, really excited to get the opportunity to go. I think racing is obviously like an added bonus. It's so cool to be able to go to NCAAs and experience that. So that was really exciting. And yeah, obviously I did not expect to race. I think as a spare, it's really interesting because like you're number one, you always want your teammates to be healthy. Like you never want anyone to be injured, and you want everything to stay as it is because it's really throws everything kind of up in the air when you have to change something. So no, it was not something I was expecting. But obviously you have to have trust in yourself that you'll be able to rise to the occasion if you need to, because that is the reason that you're there. But yeah, earlier in the season, I raced in the 2V a few times. I rode with a lot of these people in the fall as well in the 2V at Head of Charles. So I was most of all just very, very excited to get to go to NCAAs for the first time. I think felt super lucky to be in that position.
And it was a great atmosphere, wasn't it? I mean,
yeah.
Describe the atmosphere a little bit for us.
Oh, it was so awesome. It was like very hospitable. The second we arrived, we were like greeted with, you were there when
Yes.
we came in. Yeah, we were greeted with like our fight song. They gave us lays, they gave us smoothies. They had us like pick out all this stuff. It was very, very cool. We were all kind of just like, wow, what is going on?
And when were you told you had to get in the boat?
I was told like an hour before officially. I kind of knew that it might be something that would end up happening.
Were there nerves as you were going to the starting line?
Yes, I was very nervous. I was really nervous. I think like it's scary. You don't want to be someone who messes everything up. And especially like for the grand final and the biggest race of everyone's careers. But yeah, I was really, really nervous. But my teammates were really supportive and kind, and I was excited to get to row.
And the final point standings were so close. I mean, Tufts won both races, so Tufts got first. But Bates got second by 1 point.
Yeah.
And the second varsity 8 played a role in that as you were able to beat Wellesley in that grand final. And I know the 2V probably started off a little bit behind Wellesley, right? And had to come back.
Yeah, we started a little behind. Actually, I need to go back and watch the race because I think I kind of blacked out the whole race.
Yeah.
And it was very in the boat. But yeah, we always start a little behind. That's just kind of the way that our race plan goes. We don't really focus on the start as much as we focus on the back half, and we're really comfortable in our base pace. So we don't go off super fast off the line. So we started behind, and then I think we were able to walk our way through Wellesley a little bit.
It's funny. I hear that from rowers a lot, that they just kind of black out during the race.
Yeah.
And how do you balance that with having a race plan?
Well, I think the coxswain is a really helpful
Yeah.
tool. I just was sort of listening. Shoshana is our coxswain.
Yeah.
I was just really paying attention to that. There was so much going on, and I knew that we were walking up to Wellesley, and I knew that we were sort of even with William and Smith for the first part. But you obviously don't want to look out of the boat because you don't want to offset anything. And also, I was just like could not believe that this is what was happening at this moment. So I sort of kind of was not really looking around to it.
Did the team get to watch the 1V race at all?
No, we didn't get to
No.
watch because we
Yeah.
were right before them. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I wish I got to watch.
So you heard they got second.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I mean, what was your reaction when you found out that the team got second also?
That was really awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we were all really, really happy. I mean, it's hard coming in off of winning the NESCAC, which is usually the most competitive division, and being the number one seed. I think like there were a lot of maybe pressure and expectations, but we talked a lot about not really changing anything because of that and just doing exactly what we knew we needed to do. And I think that being runner-up was really meaningful to us, and there were a lot of tears. It was an exciting day.
And what's interesting about this year is the season for a number of the women and men is not over, really. It continues because of Henley, which is across the pond, if you will. And so you're practicing this week to go across to Europe for a very famous regatta. I don't honestly know a ton about it, but it's supposed to be an amazing experience. Tell me about what you're most looking forward to about this.
I'm really excited to travel so far with the team. I think that's going to be a really cool experience. And I think racing and practicing on this like very well-known course is going to be super cool. Yeah, I'm really excited. It's a very unique race. It's like kind of dual style. So it's two boats will race at a time, and it's a bracket. So you have to qualify and then make your way through the bracket, which is pretty cool and unique. And also the spectating experience is really cool as well. There's like booms on either side, and people are standing there, and there's lots of like formal attire and stuff. So it's like definitely very different from anything we have here in the U.S. So it's going to be a really cool thing.
It's an 8 and a quad.
Yes.
Which is a quad is actually different from a 4 because a quad is sculling. Tell us, for people who don't know rowing, you have experienced sculling. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so sculling is 2 oars instead of 1 oar, which is sweeping. So I learned how to row sculling. I rowed middle school and high school sculling because our team was so small. That's generally what you do when you don't have as many people as you take out boats, like quads and doubles and singles. So I rowed in singles for a long time, but the quad was actually kind of my main boat in high school. Yeah, sculling is really cool. It's interesting because it's more like uneven plane on your body. The boats are lighter usually, so they kind of go a lot faster. So that's really fun. And you don't have a coxswain, so it's a really like collaborative environment in the boat where there's someone steering and someone making calls and stuff. So yeah, it's going to be really cool to take one of those boats.
So with almost all of your background in sculling, was it an adjustment coming here with the sweeping?
Yeah, it was a bit of an adjustment. People always say that it's easier to go from sculling to sweeping than sweeping to sculling, because I think with sculling, you sort of learn technique in a different way that helps you apply it to sweeping easier. So yeah, it was definitely an adjustment, but it was cool to be able to learn.
Great. Well, any other thoughts you want to share on NCAAs or Henley coming up here?
Thank you to everyone who was cheering and watching from home, and our teammates who were not in Georgia with us. I think everyone on our team has earned this so much, and it was really, really an awesome week.
Excellent. Olivia Hill is our female Bobcat of the week for stepping up into the 2V due to injury there at NCAAs as the Bobcats took national runner-up. Thanks so much for joining us on the Bobcast.
Thank you.
While the women were in Georgia, the men's rowing team sent 2 8s and a 4 to the IRA National Championship regatta held in Gold River, California. Both 8s made their respective grand finals in the D3 races, and the Bobcats ended up finishing in 5th place overall, ahead of rival Colby in every race and in the final point standings. Senior Wiley Anderson could not race all spring due to an injury, but he stepped up in a big way, helping coach the men's team. And he is our male Bobcat of the week. So Wiley, obviously, you were able to compete a little bit in the fall this year, but unfortunately, injury made it so you could not compete in the spring. What made you decide, hey, I want to stick around, basically be like another coach, stick with the guys, and help out with the team? What kind of prompted that for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously, I was kind of dealt a pretty poor hand, but I think just being around the guys in this team and like the culture that we've all built together over these 4 years, I think is something that is a really integral part of my time at Bates. And like talking to Coach Steenstra and Coach Fitz and even Coach Greta as well on the women's side, I think that, they made it clear to me that I would be able to have a place on the team even though I couldn't row. And they were so kind and very empowering in how they let me contribute. And I think that was huge for me, but also I think a big part of the team as well. And I think that it was just an amazing experience. And it was the best thing that could have happened given the circumstances.
I'm curious, as a coach, how did that change your perspective a little bit of, the process of being a part of a rowing program?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very different side of things. I think, when you're in the boat, you tend to, be very centered on yourself and what you're doing. Obviously, I mean, there's 7 other guys or 3 other guys, depending on which boat you're in. But seeing the larger picture as, like, from a coaching launch, it really, like, brings it into perspective how you're bringing these 8 guys or 4 guys to like the same stroke, and how like it's less of like you're bringing one guy up, or it's more like you're meeting in the middle. So if someone might need a little bit more help getting to where you want them to be, you're maybe focusing on them one day, but overall, it's the much larger picture is very much more apparent from the launch as opposed to when you're sitting in the shell.
Hey, tell me about working with Coach Fitz and Coach Steenstra. What was that experience like?
It was really eye-opening. I think, I have some coaching experience with like high school rowers back when I was in high school, and I also, my sophomore year, I got injured and helped out coaching a little bit there in the spring. But they are and have been huge role models to me, and I think in terms of rowing and what it takes to be a coach, I think they're both like kind of the ideal figure, and they do such a good job of managing this massive team, and it's kind of inspiring how much they care and the effort they put in behind the scenes to make everything happen. It's just been fantastic, and getting to see another angle of it all.
It is a massive team. Mm-hmm. Rowing, I just look at all this, it's like logistics is like more than half of it, I feel like. What is it? How do you balance this? It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I think I really got keyed into that this past week in Sacramento.
Yeah.
Obviously, we were only traveling with like 26 people, not including the coaches and the administrative staff, but the amount of planning that goes into each individual day when you're on a trip like that is crazy. I think like as a rower, you're kind of told what to do, but like having to like sit down and be like, okay, like we need to leave at this time, food is here, like all that planning stuff is just, it's insanely stressful. And like kudos to all the coaches out there who do that like on a daily basis, because it was a very stressful week. And I wasn't even rowing. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, what was the California experience like for the guys though?
I think the guys had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
In the 4 years that I've been here, nationals have never been on the West Coast.
Right.
And I think that having that like long flight out, I think really like made that like the shift clear to the guys. And I think it was, started, obviously like you're on a plane with your friends, it's like, oh, it's so much fun. But I think we kind of shifted into that gear where it's like, we're going to the national championship, and like this is like the biggest regatta of our year. And I think the guys really tuned into that as we got closer and closer to California, and like the attitude was great, and it's just like it was just a fantastic week, and I think everyone was having fun. The weather was great, the rowing was awesome. Being able to be there with all those D1 teams like competing at the highest level was just awesome. Like those guys are inspiring, and they're amazing at what they do, and just I think the environment there for the team was really good. I
was going to say, because you got to experience that as a rower yourself last year in a 4 against D1 teams, because the 4 has to go against the D1s. Tell me about that, looking back, to last season.
Yeah, I think like when you're looking at like the open category for the 4s compared to the D3 category for the 8s, I think you race an extra time because there's time trials and then semis and then finals. But it's just like kind of crazy to like line up on the line, be down there at the start with like 30 other boats, and these guys are like, I'm not a small person, but these guys make me like I have to look up at them. It's like I like staring up into their eyes. It's really stressful, but it's kind of crazy to think. I am competing at this level with these guys who like this is their thing. I would like to think that rowing is sort of my thing, but like they are like the rowers. Not only just the environment of being at the IRA as a rower, but like competing against teams that like are just so prestigious in that way is one of the most motivating things that I've experienced.
Yeah, because there's probably Olympians every other team,
yeah,
right?
Exactly, yeah.
And then I'm curious, going back even further, what made Bates the place for you? Like when you were in high school looking for colleges out of Ithaca, New York, what kind of made Bates where you wanted to go?
Yeah, I think so. Growing up in Ithaca, New York, and like kind of upstate New York in general, it's very like Maine-esque in a way. It's very outdoorsy, and I think I kind of stay on the East Coast and like look at schools where I found like a community that I think would really benefit me. And like I visited other NESCAC schools and other D3 schools and a couple D1 schools. But when I came to Bates on my official visit, like the team was so kind and so open about everything. I got to sit in a practice, and just like the culture, like not even when they're on the water, but like going to practice and finishing up practice, and like the dinner after practice it was like so open. Everyone was so kind, and the coaching staff was amazing. The assistant coach at that time was Kian Noon, and I'm still very close with him, and it's like the whole coaching staff is just so open, and they're like just the culture they've built on the team, that like accepting all these walk-ons and like this like being very open to people of all experiences is just I think it's so ideal for rowing.
I was going to say, because you were not a novice though. You were in a rowing club there in high school. When did you start rowing?
I started rowing. I did like a couple like learn to row summer camps before high school. I really started rowing my freshman year of high school. I'd say end of the fall. I mostly sculled in high school, so if you don't know what that is, it's just where you have 2 oars instead of the 1. At like a really small club in upstate New York. It was called Cascadilla, and it was a very different environment because it was so small. But I think just like it's hard to have a rowing program without that kind of team culture just because it's such a team-oriented sport. And I think like for me, I used to be a swimmer. Both my brothers are swimmers. I'm coming from a swimming family. It's just like the ability to have those guys that like no matter what you do, you're doing it with whatever 7 other guys is crazy. And I ended up in my latter 2 years of high school after COVID, and I guess most of my sophomore year, I rowed in the single, which is like the one-person boat, and I raced that all through high school, which is a very different experience because you're on your own. It's very stressful because there's no one else telling you what to do. But it's like I think it was kind of ideal for me as a rower to develop like internally as well as with a team. And I think that high school rowing, depending on where you are, can be very hit or miss because of the programs there are. But I got lucky enough to be in a fantastic program like that.
So when you came to Bates, was your first time in an 8 then?
So no,
Okay.
I rowed an 8 my freshman year in the fall of high school.
Oh, okay.
Like a novice learned to row
Yeah.
8. And like it was just it's a very different experience at the high school and collegiate level. It's different levels of intensity and like training wise. But yeah, it was not my first experience as an 8.
Okay, gotcha. And then, we mentioned the novices, though. We do have a fair number of novices who come to Bates and have a lot of success. What would you kind of say to those novices when they come to the program? Like, as a senior this year, kind of like what it takes it takes a lot of commitment, obviously, to succeed, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think like when I think of like walking on a rowing team, obviously like I didn't do it in college, but like if you're willing to buy into the program, which is really easy given the guys and the women that are on the team, it's just so much fun because yes, it's a lot of time and yes, it's a lot of effort you're putting in, but like it's with your closest and best friends. And like if you're able to buy in, it is like so amazing as like a part of your collegiate experience and like just to be on a team that's close. And I think that especially Bates does it really well where the rowing on the water at times is like secondary to like the team you've built and the guys around you.
Well, and I saw that obviously, I saw Benji Richards was doing the IG Takeover Instagram, and I saw one of the posts was the men's team was watching the women race.
Yes.
So there's a lot of unity there, isn't there?
Yeah. And I mean, like, given that the women were in Georgia and we were in California, there was some time difference, which made it really nice because we could watch all their racing, like in between sessions or after our races or whatever in the morning.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, it's just like you're sitting in a hotel lobby, is clumped around a computer, watching your closest friends race on the other side of the country, and it's amazing.
So you're a senior. You've now graduated.
I have, yep.
We had graduation. We talked on Monday. We literally had graduation yesterday. I had to let Wiley into this building to record this because you're no longer a Bates student. But what's next for you?
So as of now, I'm moving to Boston, living with Benji Richards, actually.
Oh, there you go.
There we go. I'm actually coaching rowing over the summer at a program in Cambridge called Cambridge Boat Club. I was lucky enough to have, I hope, glowing recommendations from both Coach Steenstra and Coach Fitz, as well as Kian, who coached here. And I think that experiencing the coaching side of rowing here at Bates, like, I've found something that I really love. And I think that I would like to continue that at least into the summer, and I'm really excited to see how that goes. And coaching youth rowing is amazing. But after that, I have no plans. So we'll see. So
we might see you as a coach in the NESCAC someday, perhaps.
Someday, yeah. If that opens up and I'm lucky enough to get a position, I think, the NESCAC coaching staff as a whole across all the schools are very close, and it's a very good group. And I've met a bunch of them this past week at IRAs. Coach Fitz was kind enough to introduce me to literally everyone on the planet. So it was very fun. So we'll see. I don't know if that's my career path, but if it is, I would not be sad.
Excellent. So this interesting coaching, do you feel like it developed because of this spring, or did you have it earlier?
I coached walk-on middle school, high school rowers over the summers in high school, and I think it was a very different experience. But this past spring, I think has really tuned me into that. And I was lucky enough to drive my own launch, but there were days where I would be on the launch with Coach Fitz or Coach Steenstra, and it's just insane how much fun and gratifying coaching can be, and I think those two have really brought out the best aspects of that to me, and it's just fantastic to be able to learn from them as mentors.
Excellent. Any other thoughts you want to mention about IRAs or your time as a Bobcat, perhaps?
I think the biggest thing I think with regards to my time as a Bobcat is just kind of enjoy it while it's there. I think obviously I had a couple rough seasons with injury, and everyone at Bates and not even just the rowing team is so kind and so open to any kind of conversation, and all the staff is so accessible to talk about. And I think just being open to new experiences and finding the best out of the people around you is the biggest thing I'd say is like what Bates is so good at and what I would say to people coming to the college.
Great. Bobcat's fifth at IRAs, and Wiley Anderson is our male Bobcat of the week, coaching them over there in California. Thanks so much for joining us on the Bobcast.
Of course. Thank you very much.
It was quite the year for Stacey Bunting to debut as the Bates Director of Athletics. Field hockey, women's basketball, and women's rowing all won NESCAC titles, the first time in school history that 3 different teams won NESCAC championships in the same year. Plus, men's lacrosse made the NCAA tournament for the 3rd time in program history, and men's basketball made the NCAA Division III tournament for the 2nd time in program history. On top of that, men's swimming took home a pair of national titles and placed 6th overall at the NCAA Championships, their best finish ever. There's been a lot of success on and off the field, and Bunting joins us this week to look back on it all. Well, Stacey, what a first year. I mean, 3 NESCAC championships for the Bobcats, of course, highlighting the season, but also, of course, the Hall of Fame, 150 years of Bates football, 50 years of Bates softball, the Starter Fitness and Wellbeing Center. I mean, so many highlights. When you started in last July, could you have imagined like all these amazing highlights in one year? I mean, what are your thoughts overall kind of about your first year here as a Bobcat?
Sure. And thank you, Aaron, for giving me the chance to come back on here with you. Obviously, launched my time at Bates with you back in July, and excited to be back here with you as we wrap up the season. What a year, right? Like everything you just said and more. It was amazing. The energy, the momentum that this year has brought us has been really special. The welcome that I received, right, from the minute I got here, from alums and colleagues and students and staff and families, it has just been tremendous. And that set the tone right from the go. And then to come into the year, like you said, with the list of things that we've dealt with and experienced and celebrated, it's been a great year to be a Bobcat for sure.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, what was your initial impressions kind of like, what kind of stood out to you right away when you got here? What was your first thoughts kind of like, oh, this is going to be, maybe a little different from what I've experienced before, perhaps? I mean, coming from Princeton, which is, an Ivy League high academic, but, Bates is obviously its own place, right?
Sure, absolutely. I talked about this to folks, like every campus I've been on is distinctly different and unique to itself, right? And special for its own reasons. And Bates is no different to that. I got here July of last year, so I'm just coming up on the 12-month mark here soon. And it was a little bit quiet on campus when I got there, which was probably not a bad thing because it gave me a minute to acclimate a little bit. But, one of the first things I did was sit and get time with our assistant coaches, our staff, our head coaches across the department, colleagues across the campus. I spent those first probably 6-8 weeks meeting with folks in all those categories and all those avenues, and really getting to know the essence of Bates, right? And what that great conversations with alums. I had folks I was able to get connected to pretty quickly from an alumni perspective too. And so to have those conversations was really important to me because I wanted to hear from the people who lived it, experienced it, represent it, the things that were special and what we were doing really well and what we wanted to be better at and all those things. And so that was so big for me in the beginning to be able to do that. It really gave me such a sense of, it's cliche, right? Everybody says the people are special where they're at, but I can say, having been a couple places, they absolutely are at Bates, and I felt that right away. Again, folks were so welcoming, so supportive, and as a result of that, I knew right away that I was at the right spot, and then the year certainly did not disappoint.
And you got to be at the first Hall of Fame ever induction ceremony, and also now, of course, on the Hall of Fame committee. We're going to be announcing the Hall of Fame class, the second one, pretty soon. What are your kind of thoughts on meeting the first Hall of Fame class at the ceremony, and now also being on the committee? What was that like for you?
Yeah, it was really special, right? For it to be in its inaugural year. I know folks before me had started the wheels in motion, and the work had been done to really build up and get this, such an important thing done for Bates and the athletics department. And so to be able to come in and be a part of that and experience it this first fall, I'm really appreciative of that and of the work that had been done, and to get to be in that space, right? We had 400 or 500 people in gray, and it was just a great day celebrating all things Bates, and to get a snapshot, to get a glimpse into our legacy inductees to the first year inaugural class. There was just so much history, so much pride, so much to celebrate, so many great stories to be told. It was really special to be in that room, and I'm appreciative of that opportunity. And then to your point, this spring I got to go through my first committee process, which that was a challenge in itself, right? There's no shortage of amazing individuals who have been here at Bates, either as coaches or administrators, or certainly all of our athletes. And so to be presented with that scope of work to review and look at was even more impressive. And so, like I said, it was no easy task, as you know, as a member of that group. But we got through it. And the good news is we've got plenty of years ahead of us to keep building and keep growing.
You prepare as best you can, right, to be, the AD at an institution like Bates. Did anything maybe surprise you a little bit, in your first year? Anything you're like, wow, I wasn't expecting that?
Sure. Great question. I mean, there's always surprises. Yeah, and I would probably counter you and say I don't know that you're ever actually prepared to be an AD, right? You can do your best. You can learn all the things, you can have all the mentors, listen to all the experiences and stories and opportunities, but until you're in the chair, right? I don't know that you fully appreciate the scope of it. And so that's been a big part of the year too, right? And an exciting part of the year. It's not been daunting in any way, but it's been energizing and exciting. And to your question, sure. I mean, there's always things that come up that you're like, oh, we do this that way, or oh, I didn't realize that, or oh, I need to know more about this. But I don't think there's anything that shocked me, right? I think again, I was just so impressed by the commitment of our students, the commitment of our families. That maybe was a unique, nice change for me. One of my first trips on the road, I tried to travel to a lot of away games as well this year for as many of the sports that I worked directly with as I could. And seeing our presence on the road as Bates families and alums and all of the things was wildly impressive. One of my first away football games I went to, and I was driving and I'm like, wait a minute, why do I see a whole parking lot of Bates people? What is happening here? I will remember a day, I was at Tufts. We had a day in Saturday in the fall where we had, soccers and field hockey and all the things happening up at their place. And to go up there and to see it filled with as much garnet as it was, any light blue, was really fantastic. And so I was like, and I asked people, I was like, what is this? Is this normal? Like we have such a presence on the road as much as we do at home. And folks are like, absolutely. That's how we roll. That's what we do. So, that was a really cool surprise. I had not, to be honest, certainly some of the places I've been, there are certainly probably some sports that have that type of following, but I feel like I saw that collectively across our programs everywhere I went, and it was really cool. I never felt like I was the only one, in a gym or on a sideline with Bates on. I would look around and there'd be pretty big contingencies around me.
Yeah, and some major facilities things happening with the Stoddard Fitness and Wellbeing Center, and of course softball. The announcement of the turf field being installed this summer and everything. I mean, this is obviously very exciting news to happen. Your first year here, that's got to be pretty cool. What are your thoughts? What are the thoughts on how this is going to change things for the campus writ large, really, with the Fitness and Wellbeing Center, and for the softball program? Obviously, the turf is going to be transformative for them, right?
Yeah, I'm so proud, Aaron. Like I am so proud of all the people who worked together to get this done, right? Of all the people who put their time, talent, and treasure towards these projects, right? To make them happen, whether they were able to be a voice for us in the effort, whether they were able to write a check in the effort, whether they just supported us moving forward because they recognized the value and investment of what this would do for the department. I'm just really appreciative of that because it's not like that everywhere, right? And so my first answer to you is that I would say that part was been great and so appreciative. And then to your point, I mean, it's going to be transformational. I've talked a lot to folks about, the Stoddard, and selfishly, is it going to be tremendous for athletics? Absolutely it is, right? It's going to be program changing. It's going to be great, but it's also so transformational for campus, right? And when I think about that piece as it relates to fitness and recreation and well-being and really becoming another central hub to our campus that we need, and that, I talk a lot about, athletics and rec is the largest leadership lab on campus with real life experiences. We currently have, between all of those areas and opportunities, we have, probably 80% of the campus population participate that we serve. And I feel pretty confident with the Stoddard that we're going to end up at 100%, right? Because there's going to be something for everybody. So that's really big, right? That's exciting for campus. That's exciting for athletics. And then softball, the turf there, that might be the piece I'm proudest of. We've had such great progress well before me on the other turfs and the other facilities, baseball being most recent. But when I got here, softball is what I heard about pretty quickly. And, I had a chance to visit with the team and to really talk with our campus partners strategically about, what we need to do to make this happen. And folks were all in. And, we're breaking ground this week with the intent of having it ready by the fall, and what that will do for those young ladies, those young women, and for that program from a future perspective. It'll allow us to recruit differently. It'll allow us to play the home games we need to play, right? We are appreciative of our home away from home that we've had just up the way, but it'll be really nice to be able to play home games at home. And so I couldn't be happier for that group. And they have really built and continued to thrive, on the field and off. And I think that still really be the next big stepping stone for them.
And we touched on this earlier, but 3 NESCAC titles in one school year. That's never happened before at Bates.
Mm-hmm.
And then men's swimming, 6 in the country, their best finish ever, 2 national championships, men's lacrosse hosting NCAAs, men's basketball making it for the second time in Division III. I mean, the Directors' Cup final standings haven't come out. It's going to be pretty good, though.
Yeah.
The question now is maintaining, right? Maintaining is the hardest part in college athletics. What are your thoughts on how do you keep this momentum going, right?
100%. And I couldn't agree with you more. I'm so excited about this year. I'm so proud of this year. It's a good problem to have when you've got a lot of NESCAC championship rings to order, right? So I'm really excited about that. But I also feel really strongly this wasn't a fluke, right? This wasn't just going to be a blip on the radar. This is who we are, and this is who we're going to be. We had the majority of all our programs made the NESCAC playoffs this year, right? And the couple who didn't just barely missed. And so that's what we want to do, right? We want to have great, it goes back to, I'll take a step back. It goes back to obviously, the student athlete experience is at the forefront of everything we're doing, right? And what their experience is as a student at Bates and what that looks like and feels like. And that's academics and that's social. And it's also their athletic experience. And, I joked with some folks when I first got here, or is it, can we talk about winning, right? Because can that be part of the experience? Not at the expense of anything else, not doing it the right way, right? But if we are doing all the things the right way that we want to do across the full student experience, then winning should be a byproduct of that, right? And having been able to share those moments with a lot of our teams this year, there's no better feeling, they work so hard in the classroom. They work so hard out of the classroom and training and practice and the strength room and all the things. And to see that be rewarded and acknowledged the further we go in postseason, that is really important to me, that we do embrace that. We do understand that we look and see it's achievable. It's attainable, right? There's no reason we can't continue to make this type of noise. And I'm excited about the energy and the positivity with everybody being a part of that.
Absolutely. Well, any other thoughts you want to mention on your first year as AD here at Bates we haven't got to talk about yet?
I think, again, we had tremendous academic success, right? Our GPA for the year was outstanding. We've had so many NESCAC academic awards this year that I'm super equally as proud of that, right? As we are of the other championships. That is equally important to what we're doing and what that looks like. I think, we've tried to think about creating moments for the athletes. We had a really great opportunity this past weekend around commencement. We had a student athlete reception for the first time. We had probably 350, 400 families there celebrating their athletes and their students and their accomplishments. We were able to do custom grad stoles for them, which the looking out and seeing them on commencement day, right? Seeing our folks part of that crowd and such an integral part of the campus fabric, really overwhelmed me, right? And it filled me with such pride and emotion for them. And so that was a really cool moment, right? So how do we continue to create moments and experiences that bring us together and celebrate us that way? And then I would also, I can't close without a huge thank you. The philanthropy we've seen this year, right? From everybody, from all of our audiences, again, from our alums, from our families, from our coaches, from our student athletes, from partners on campus. We've set records this year. We had a tremendous giving day back in May. At this point, it's all blur, but
Right.
in May, we set new records there, and that's not a fluke, right? That doesn't happen accidentally. That happened with a lot of energy and effort and passion that went into that. We've been moved from a 3-day to a 1-day this year. We had tremendous partners on campus who were part of that with us. And that's really exciting, right? Because that says that folks are invested, they are committed to us, and they're in it with us, right? Because we're not going to do it by ourselves. We're not going to do it without support from campus, without support from our external folks. And so that I just want to reiterate what a huge thank you for that. And a huge thank you for the welcome. I know I said that a little bit at the beginning, but the welcome I've received at Bates has left me with no doubt that I made absolutely the right decision and I'm absolutely at the right place. And the welcome and the kindness and then the generosity that folks have shared, the support that they have offered, I cannot say thank you enough for that. And I'm so appreciative of it.
Stacey Bunting joining us from the NESCAC meetings. Thank you so much for taking the time here on the Bobcast to wrap up the academic year here and a great season for Bates Athletics. Really appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Aaron. Appreciate it. Here's to 26-27.
Richard Johnson from the class of 1978 has had a remarkable career. The author of more than 20 books, he has been the curator of the Sports Museum in Boston since 1982. Recently, Johnson announced his retirement. He's a member of the Bates Athletics Hall of Fame Committee, and with a second class to be announced soon, Johnson joins the Bobcast for a look back on his time at Bates and at the Sports Museum. Let's start at the very beginning. What made sports such a passion of yours from the get-go?
That's pretty easy. I had the good fortune of growing up in Worcester, close enough to Boston to be rooting for all the Boston teams, but just far enough away to, sort of have as the teams I rooted for as a kid, and whose games I attended were the football and basketball games of our Holy Cross Crusaders. And, at that point, Holy Cross was still very much an East Coast basketball power. Worcester, a great basketball city, in terms of sort of the overall embrace of the sport. And, of course, we lived half a mile from Bob Cousy. Even though he had, just retired when I was 8 years old, he was in the neighborhood. And so it was very hard not to grow up in a great environment of sports. And the various schools that I attended, from the public school of Flag Street, which had great sports teams. Back then, I don't know if this is still true, they had a league of elementary school sports teams. I mean, I don't know if schools have the money to do that now. We had a touch football team, basketball team. I was on the basketball team. And then I went to Bancroft School, a small private school in Worcester, where I did a little bit of everything. And then I went to Lawrence Academy in Groton, Massachusetts, where I did a little bit of everything. So, it was basically being able to sample from this wonderful sort of sporting smorgasbord.
Yeah, and then, you mentioned, being a Holy Cross fan, but when it came time to go to college, you decided to go to Bates. What made Bates the place for you?
Well, it was sort of a natural for me. My father had been a graduate of the class of 1936. One of his good friends was former Senator and Secretary of State, Ed Muskie. He loved his time at Bates, and they had a really good cross-country and track team. And so when I went up for my interview with the legendary Milt Lindholm, I was told to bring my running gear, and I went out on a run with Norm Graff and Andy Lovely, two of the great members of that Walt Sylvensky team. And I was just hoping and praying that my grades would be good enough to get me in. And I think they did. I think Milt probably helped a little bit too, as he helped a lot of student athletes.
And so what stood out about your time at Bates? I mean, I know you're on the cross-country team, and then, when you graduated, what did you kind of take away from your experience here that you really use going forward?
I'm pretty sure I was the only art history major in my graduating class. And as my dad said, well, that's a passport to poverty, And well, he wasn't quite true, but he was saying it jokingly, I think half jokingly, but No, my time at Bates was one where, at least for my first 2 years, I competed on some great cross country teams and indoor track teams. I had never run indoor track before, and I delighted in that. And Walt Slavensky was a real inspiration, and he continues to be. What a great coach, what a great leader. And the teams he put together were outstanding. I mean, our freshman class, which made a huge splash. I mean, I was the caboose on that train, but Paul Oporowski, Tom Leonard, Rick DeBruin. I mean, wow. And that freshman year, our cross country team was ranked number 6th in New England. All schools, not, none of this Division 1, 2, 3 stuff. These were all the schools. So we were behind, schools like Northeastern, Providence, UMass, UConn. And that's pretty impressive, And I have a slight feeling that our undefeated team from that year may get consideration for the Athletic Hall of Fame, although I'll have to dismiss myself from the committee for that vote. But knock on wood, I think we certainly would deserve it. But I remember that year we beat Brandeis by 1 point at Franklin Park. But anyway, so the other, parts of my experience at Bates that were integral to sort of, what I ended up doing were being able to take short terms in London and New York City. So, we had a wonderful Shakespeare studies trip to London. My junior year and senior year went to New York City. And I mean, wow, that was a great thing to do because it's certainly one thing to be studying in the library in Lewiston, and it's another thing to be living in the Vanderbilt YMCA in New York City and going to museums every day and sort of drinking everything in at that point. And the same was true with going to London and taking the train to Stratford to see Shakespearean plays. I saw Ian McKellen play Romeo at the Royal Shakespeare Company. I mean, come on. And these are all opportunities afforded by Bates College.
4 years after you graduate, you become the first employee of what was in the New England Sports Museum. It's now just the Sports Museum as their curator. And we put employee in quotes because you weren't paid for quite some time. Tell me a little bit about that story.
Well, I was the naive, probably, I don't know. I basically was told I could be the first employee. It was fledgling with a capital F. But that the pay I would earn, at least at that point, would be deferred. Well, there was 3 years of that. And so I'm guessing what it was, any plans I had to go to graduate school were put on the shelf. I lived on Kraft macaroni and cheese and tuna fish for 3 years, put on about 20 pounds, but found my footing in, a career that I loved. I'd been an art history student. I really didn't have the language skills to go on and get a doctorate in art history. You have to know either French or German or French and German to get an advanced degree in that field. That wasn't happening, I'm afraid, and I'm still working on English, actually. And so the opportunity to create a museum capturing and preserving the heritage of the greatest regional sports, because I include not just Greater Boston, but the entire New England region, the greatest sports region on the planet, and I would debate that forever, was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I wanted to make the most of it.
Was there a major breakthrough? Because you're in there on the ground level, right? Building this from scratch, basically. Was there a major breakthrough in terms of like an exhibit or a moment that kind of really put the museum on the map?
Yeah, I'll tell you what the breakthrough was, and it was after I'd been there for roughly a year. I mean, I'd looked at our board of trustees, the list of names, and I saw 2 names that just jumped out at me. Ted Williams was the first. I mean, okay.
Yeah.
Be like, running a museum of popular music and seeing Sinatra on the list. Okay. So I called Ted Williams, and he called me back, and we arranged to meet down at his baseball camp in Lakeville, Mass. And that was very helpful. But the most instrumental event occurred when I called Dave Cowens, who was also a member of our board, and I asked if I could go and speak with him. So I drove to Needham, where he lived at the time. Uh, you may recall he had made a brief comeback with the Milwaukee Bucks, and he'd been injured during that year. So he played 82, 83 for the Bucks, and then he was home nursing his injury. So I drive out to his house. He's sitting on his back porch with his leg in a cast. And for 3 hours, we talked about the museum, what it could be, what it should be. I then was not shy. I asked him, would he consider expanding his role? Because at the time, he was really a name on a list. He hadn't really been engaged. Well, he was in Milwaukee, so what could he do, you know? And he confided in me that he would be retiring from active play. I think I helped convince him that the museum was a very worthy undertaking for him. And for the next 10 and a half years, Dave Cowens, trying to think of the equivalent on other teams, Terry O'Reilly, Dustin Pedroia, you know, guys who get the uniform dirty. For the next 10 and a half years, Dave Cowens got his uniform dirty for the Sports Museum as a volunteer, opening doors, closing deals, making appeals to politicians, to corporate people, foundations, to get us off the ground. And he did so. And Dave is one of the enduring heroes of Boston sports, not just as a two-time NBA champion, but as a person who's really community-minded and very, you know, a very independent soul. He's always someone who's incredibly interesting to speak with. I asked him one time what he thought of the three-point shot, which I am not a fan of. Okay, I'm an old fogey, you know, get off my lawn kind of guy. And he laughed. He said, Richard, he said, I'd kind of like there to be a 4-point shot. If they could make a line maybe closer to half court. You know, that was just typical Dave. Dave, again, that was the key event in my first few years with the museum that really helped push us forward. Because, you know, if he'd said that he didn't have time to do anything, or, yeah, I'd have been looking at that, and our rest of our trustees would have been looking at it saying, okay, who is going to be the person whose phone calls will get returned? Wasn't going to be me. At least not at that point. And how are we going to do this? Well, he helped to lead us out of the wilderness.
I feel like it'll be harder nowadays to start something like this because athletes like someone like who would play in the NBA like him are not nearly as accessible.
What kind of guy is Dave Cowens? I can tell you, on a day when the schools in Needham closed early due to a snowstorm, he was one of the first people I know that drove a Chevy Suburban, like he was driving a Suburban 30 years ago.
Yeah.
He looked like someone from the electric company coming to read your meter or something. This big, you know, super station wagon, right? Well, on the day that the schools closed early, he drove any number of kids home from the Needham schools who were going to school with his kids who couldn't get a ride home. Their parents were at work, and the school buses were way behind schedule. And so he lined them up. He said, all right, who needs a ride home? Hi, Mr. Cowens. You know, if there'd been a movie about him, 80 years ago, he would have been played by Jimmy Stewart. You know, I remember the first time I saw the movie, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. I called him the next day. I said, I saw a movie that reminded me perfectly of you. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. You're Jefferson Smith, you know. So he was Jefferson Smith in high tops as a player, and he filled that role for us for the 10 and a half years he was our chair.
Excellent. And then you mentioned in the article, and I think you said it before also, we're on the Bates Hall of Fame committee, that the Baseball Hall of Fame is kind of where you look for sometimes for inspiration for the sports museum in terms of how to best set things up in terms of, what makes a good museum. And tell me a little bit about how you've, modeled the sports museum a little bit after what you've seen at the Baseball Hall of Fame. And because that's, if you haven't been to the Hall of Fame for baseball, it's a Hall of Fame, yes, but there's also a huge museum component, mostly a museum, really.
Yeah, I mean, I went to Cooperstown the first time 48 years ago and was just so impressed with their galleries, with the fact they had a library, they
Yeah.
had a research collection and again, I'm a big baseball fan, so it was, and even though Cooperstown was not where baseball was invented,
Right.
well, the Hollywood version that's where it should have been invented because it is a perfect place well, actually, they have any number of other museums there too, which I've discovered over the years. It's a museum community. It's in a perfect setting, and it's just far enough away from the maddening crowd, to allow you to really immerse yourself in the subject matter. I've gone there to work on books too in their library, and it's really state of the art. So yeah, I certainly draw inspiration from what they do.
You've written a lot of books. I'm glad you brought that up. What was the first book you wrote? How did you first decide, hey, I really want to also, in addition to curating this museum, I want to start writing books about Boston sports history, different events. What was the first one? How did you first, decide you wanted to do that?
Well, it's interesting. I've also formed a lot of partnerships too. So my really good friend, and I think the best writer of sports history in the country, Glenn Stout, he and I worked on and put together a book on Ted Williams. And the reason that even came about, I mean, just pure happenstance. I was asked by a friend to speak to someone from the Walker Publishing Company about promoting a book about the Detroit Tigers. Well, I guess, because I had worked in publishing briefly for Houghton Mifflin, my friend thought I knew something about promoting books. Well, I knew and certainly a certain amount about reviewing books. I was doing that at the time and buying books. I mean, if you've seen my house, it's basically a fortress of books. But I figured, okay, what the heck? I'll be taken to lunch. I'll have a nice time talking with these guys. I knew the author of the book on the Tigers, Joe Falls. I mean, I knew him as a reader. So, I just gave some very common sense advice about, selling it to Tiger season ticket holders and, stuff that's pretty much pretty basic. But at the end of the lunch, we were just ordering dessert. And this gentleman said, "Oh, do you have any ideas for a book?" I was not prepared in the slightest for that question. But you know what? As my mother used to say many times, take the cookies when they're passed to you. If someone's offering you an opportunity, or if someone's throwing a change up and you're prepared for it, hit it out of the park. And so on the back of a manila envelope, I wrote the outline for a book that I just sort of pulled out of my hindquarters on Ted Williams. And I thought, oh, what would be a good book? Well, I'd always loved a book called The Ultimate Baseball Book. And it's basically a book that was a collection of narrative text interspersed with essays. So I came up with this idea of, okay, the narrative history of Ted Williams, lavishly illustrated, and then let's try to get essays from people like David Halberstam, Stephen Jay Gould, George V. Higgins, And these are people I knew a little bit. I knew enough to call them. And then I knew my friend Glenn Stout, who had been writing sports articles for Boston Magazine. I knew Glenn would have the bandwidth to write the text. I mean, I had my hands full with the museum, but that I would put the project together, sort of be the coach, be the offensive coordinator. I don't know, and then we get it off the ground. Well, sure enough, they agreed within a week, based on a handwritten outline on the back of an envelope, and then. Interestingly enough, it was a 1991 New York Times book review one of the noteworthy books of the year. Okay, sometimes, you do hit one out of the park on that first pitch, and that's what happened. And so it was the beginning of a very beautiful professional relationship with Glenn. We'd already been close friends, and he and I worked on a number of books together. And then I've done a number of books solely on my own, but I've also had the benefit of working with some great people.
Now, in that Ted Williams book, did you include the story of Chick Leahy cutting his son from the Bates baseball team?
I don't think so, but it's funny. I knew John Henry Williams a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. In fact, he was one of the first people that I told about the project because I would not have proceeded with it if it wasn't okay with his father, who was the trustee of the Sports Museum.
Right.
He got back to me, he said, "Oh no." He said he's fine with it. He said, "But could you let us know when you've gathered the photographs for this? I think he'd like to see them." Well, what was interesting was Ted's father was a photographer. He was a photographer in San Diego. So I remember driving out to Cooperstown. Glenn and I drove out to Cooperstown. I remember it was the first day of the 1990 World Cup because I remember hearing Cameroon had scored a big upset that day. And, anyway, so we're there. Ted is looking through the pictures. He's giving us an audience for like an hour. We're just hanging out with him. It's like, wow. And we had a picture of we had a picture of his father, which he had never seen before. And his son, John Henry, had never seen a picture of his grandfather. So Ted paused. He sort of held it up. And I was so afraid he was going to get angry because I know his parents had divorced. But instead he said, "Wow, I'd never seen this before." And then he called over to John Henry, "Come over here and see your grandfather." And so we made a print of that for him to send to him. And then the ultimate great review we had for that book, apart from, the Times, was Ted ordered 100 copies of the book to send to friends, including President Bush, then President Bush, who wrote a letter back to him saying how much he enjoyed the book. Well, that was a fortuitous start.
Yeah, that makes the next book a lot easier to get published, I guess, right?
Yeah. And then the next one was a similar book on Joe DiMaggio.
Joe DiMaggio, Ted Williams, I mean, they were contemporaries, obviously. I mean, you're a Boston guy. What are your thoughts on that debate?
Well, Ted and Joe were sort of the bookends of that era. They were just, before Mickey Mantle and Willie Mays in terms of sort of the comparison of great outfielders. And we got Ted to write the introduction to the DiMaggio book. And what I had to laugh at was his own personal feeling was he liked Yogi Berra and thought Berra was a more important player than Joe. We didn't put that in the introduction, of course, but I love the fact that he was a Yogi guy through and through, and I'm a Yogi guy as well. So one of the great players, and maybe one of the most underappreciated players, because his personality and his malapropisms and quips and everything tend to overshadow his greatness as a player.
Yeah, certainly. I saw a documentary they made a few years back about how some of his children are we wish people focus more on Yogi's actual baseball ability because he was so good at baseball. People forget about that, obviously.
Yeah, the documentary is one of my favorite ones, and the fact that he was part of the D-Day invasion. Yes. I mean, he checked all the boxes for the greatest generation. That and the fact that he brought so much joy. He had fun doing what he was doing, and I think fans can relate to that. They love performers who, okay, it's one thing to be a champion and to do well, but to do it with a certain joie de vivre, to just sort of be out there and, display the fact that you're living the dream every day. And he did that in spades.
So the Sports Museum, and sort of, if you could give us a little history in terms of when did it move into the garden? How did that kind of go?
Well, it's an interesting story. We were at the Cambridge Side Galleria, and I used to joke to say, I mean, despite the fact that the museum looked great there and it was really a beautiful presentation, I used to joke that we were running a scared straight program for running a museum in a mall because, at a certain point we had to generate a certain amount of money per square foot, and that just wasn't happening. I mean, you're running a non-for-profit, you're basically, your income is being derived from grants and charitable gifts and everything. And then, so we had to move. And what was interesting was, I forget which of our trustees just bumped into Rich Creswick, who was then head of the garden. And there was a need at the garden. The garden had just opened in 95, okay? So we started talking with the people there in 97. Well, when that arena first opened, there was nothing in the building that connected it with the rich history of the past. It sort of looked like an airport Holiday Inn somewhere, and great arena, but nothing tying it to the history that preceded it. Well, we could deliver the goods in that, and so we made a very interesting arrangement, which lasts to this day, where we run our nonprofit or organization, the Sports Museum, a 501c3, within the corporate framework of TD of the Delaware North Corporation. So I've been an employee of Delaware North for the past, 26 years, as well as being an employee of the Sports Museum, and it's worked out perfectly. And so all credit goes to the Jacobs family, to the various, heads of the garden, which is now Glenn Thornborough. They're very understanding of what we do and who we are. I like to think we're a bridge to future clientele for the garden. When I was a young kid, you'd go to Bruins game and second balcony for $3. That is not true anymore. So the museum provides an entry point for young audiences, school groups and everything, to come and make that important emotional connection that will lead them to be future buyers of tickets, and suites and everything. And of course, that's not the reason that we exist. We exist to, work as a community programmer for things like our award-winning Boston versus Bullies anti-bullying program. We are the caretakers of the greatest regional sports tradition in the world with our archive and library and the displays we do. So we try to, accomplish all of that within the four walls of the garden as well as within the community itself.
Yeah, I read that you're still going to be there part-time. So how part-time are you going to be? I imagine it's going to be a little hard to let go, right?
Well, I was there working for 6 hours there yesterday.
Right.
It was a good day. Sunday, the Red Sox are on the road. Traffic's a lot easier to, drive through. And then I'll probably spend another 2 hours at the warehouse after we're through with this call. And yeah, no, does anyone have to twist my arm to do any of this? Absolutely not. But when the museum does hire my replacement, I've said, look, I will not be a backseat driver. I will want whoever that person is to, find their way and do their thing. But I always hope to be involved at least in some capacity to help to move it forward because, I joke sometimes we're still constructing the airplane at 20,000 feet.
Have there ever been any Bates athletics related items at the sports museum during your time?
Yeah, I think I've displayed. I think one of the things I displayed one time was I happen to own in my own collection the Bates Harvard football program from 1919. Bates was the first game for a Harvard team that won the Rose Bowl. I mean, okay, so I'm wondering, do any of our other CBB compatriots can they boast of the fact of being on a schedule of a Rose Bowl championship team? I don't think so. I mean, I haven't checked, but I think we can take that to the bank. So we've displayed that, and then we also have displayed a team photo of one of the rowing championship teams of one of the women's NCAA champs, and then have also displayed a banner, a cloth banner in our Title IX display of the rowers as well. We're very proud of that tradition. Of course, a sport that didn't exist when I was at Bates. Of course, we didn't have a swimming pool either.
Right. Yeah, I saw your comment the other day about how like when you were there, there wasn't even a swimming pool. Now the swimming team is like one of the top teams in the country. Can't even believe it, right?
I can't believe it. And the joke used to be, and I think it was a joke, that a contributor gave the chimes at Hathorne Hall instead of a swimming pool. And I was like, wait a minute, I want to find this person. What the, you know what? Anyway, but it worked out in the end.
Yeah, certainly, certainly. Well, anything else you wanted to mention about, your time at Bates or as the curator of the Sports Museum? Anything else you wanted to mention that we haven't got to talk about yet in terms of that you feel like is important people should know?
Bates provided the perfect balance of, sports and academics, and just as a place where you could sort of have your own voyage of self-discovery. I can remember being incredibly delighted walking into the library, and just because I grew up going to libraries in Worcester, I've always been a library guy. And of course, I've never had the discipline to actually do the homework and the subjects I should have been doing. So if one were to look at my transcript, once I was able to negotiate all of the requirements, chemistry, French, the trapdoors to my existence, once I got to history and art history and English and the subjects that I loved, but I would spend time in the library just going through the stacks and pulling books out and reading stuff that had nothing to do with the courses I was taking. So again, the library, it remains still one of my favorite places. And then being able to compete on teams that were so good. The one place that I occasionally will have a dream of is the cage on Saturday afternoons. We have indoor track meets there. And, I'm glad that the cage is still there. I'm sad that it no longer has the dirt track and the balconies. But there was nothing like a Saturday afternoon where it'd be like 3 degrees outside, but the radiators would be hissing inside the cage, and we'd be running in a meet where, it would be decided by the last event, the 2-mile relay. And it would be against, some larger school like Holy Cross. And, we would always do really well. There would always be great crowds up on the balcony. So, being at a sporting event in a Division III school where you had a 2-tiered area for spectators, where you had like folks in sort of the cheap seats cheering you on and stomping on the wooden track above you, that was great. I mean, it was, for someone who'd gone to a small private school, my high school graduating class was less than 70 people. And to be in this atmosphere, it was great. So, how much inspiration did I draw and continue to draw from the Bates experience? Lots. And it's been fun to be on the selection committee for our new Athletic Hall of Fame, and to work with people like Ira Waldman, who is a gem, and then, of course, my longtime friend Joe Gromelsky, who I keep in touch with. Bates is a special place in my heart.
Yeah, you mentioned the Hall of Fame committee, of course. We can't talk about this year's class quite yet, but we'll be announcing that very soon. You mentioned that. I mean, it was exciting to, discuss some of these great athletes. And I'm sure, if you maybe want to touch on that in general terms about, the people we elected this year, another great class, right?
Well, the fact is that we had record holders. We had national. Yeah. I can remember on my trip to Bates from high school, walking into the gym and seeing the Penn relay plaques. Wait a minute, Penn relay plaques for, oh yeah. So we were, we've always punched above our weight. And academically, I was looking at the group of Fulbright scholars for this year. It's impressive. Yeah, we were the national debate champions back in the 1920s. Brooks Quimby, and my dad was a poor kid who went to Bates and became a neurosurgeon. Ed Muskie was a poor kid who almost became president. There's a lot to say about a school where it's a place of privilege but not pretense. I'm not going to name any of our other fellow NESCAC schools that are sort of on their high horse all the time. Whereas at Bates, I think there's a very democratic feel. The lack of fraternities impressed me also. As a semi-child of the late 60s and everything, there was something to be said for a place where there was not the class consciousness that existed at these other places. There were no secret societies, no frats, no social division. Everybody was there, and you were judged by the merits of who you were and what you did. Amen to that, and it's still true.
Excellent. Richard Johnson, class of 1978, just recently retired as the curator of the Sports Museum, where he was there since 1982 and is still there, as you just heard, for quite a bit as well. Thank you so much for joining us for the Bobcast. Congrats on a great career, and looking forward to working with you continuously there on the Hall of Fame committee in the years to come. Really appreciate it.
Aaron, thank you so much.
This is the season finale of the Bobcast, as we'll be taking our usual summer hiatus. However, stick with GoBatesBobcats.com for all the latest Bates athletics news, including the announcement of the second Bates Athletics Hall of Fame class. Thanks for tuning in all year to the Bates Bobcast.